Wilkinson Kelly. I'm the archivist at the Edith B. Ford Memorial Library in Oban, New York. This interview is being conducted as part of the Cayuga and Seneca Lakes Agriculture and Craft Beverage Memory Project. Today is May 13, 2020. I am interviewing Erica Paolicelli of Three Brothers Winery. Hi, good afternoon.
Hi.
Hi, could you say your full name?
Sure, Erica Paolicelli.
And your establishment, winery, is?
Three Brothers Wineries. We're at 623 Lurch Road. We're located in Geneva, New York.
Okay. And can you tell me about your background?
Sure. So I grew up in the Finger Lakes. I went to school at SUNY Oneonta. So I went for dietetics and never in my life thought that I was going to be an owner at a winery. I came back to the region. This is where I'm from for the summer, looking for a summer job here in the Finger Lakes. And back then, that's when you got jobs from the newspaper. So I was looking through the help wanted and saw that some wineries were hiring. And I had an interview at Nagy's Newland Vineyard and Winery. I had never heard of it before. And coincidentally, actually, my grandfather lived on one side of Lurch Road and my aunt lives on the other side of Lurch Road. And so I had been on Lurch Road before, but I had no idea that there was a winery there. So I drove out here and did the interview. I met my now partner, Dave Mansfield. He was just purchasing the winery from Dale Nagy. And they were planting vineyards and building new tasting rooms. They were hiring for the small 10 by 10 tasting room that was on the estate. And so I talked with them. It was kind of a short interview and got the job. They said, you can start. I said, oh, all right, I'm just here for the summer. I was on my way to Missouri for exercise nutrition, a master's in exercise nutrition. I had a full ride. So I was excited to be on my way at the end of summer. And from that time in the beginning, early summer to around the beginning of August when I was supposed to move, Dave and I had really Dave had gotten me really excited about the project and said, if you want a job, you have a place here. And I was kind of trying to talk myself into leaving, and he was trying to talk me into staying. And I said, you know what, I was young and naive, and that worked to my advantage, really. So I passed on the opportunity in Missouri, and the rest is history. That's kind of how I got into it. It was really just happenstance, to be honest with you. I've been in hospitality my entire life. When I was 13, I was bussing tables at Connie's Diner in Waterloo. And so it's really natural for me, I guess, to end up in hospitality. And this has been really great. It's been fun for me. I have a passion in nutrition, but what I was finding out when I was in college and doing my internships and things like that is that I didn't want to work in a clinical setting. So I was trying to figure out really where I was going to end up when it came to that nutrition, gig. So I didn't have a concrete plan. So when I came here, it was pretty easy to talk me into doing something different. And so I've never really looked back. Never had any regrets.
And what year was that again?
That was in 2007.
And that's when the winery opened. Correct?
Yeah, September. So when I came, it was June, and we opened September, Labor Day weekend of 2007.
And do you know how many acres were initially
when
purchased?
Dave purchased the property, there was only 15 acres of grapevines. We now have 40.
Wow. So your chemistry background or science background, was that useful for you?
No, honestly, nutrition is a lot of biology. And my husband actually, a couple years in, he came on as our vineyard manager. But I'd never had anything to do with the winemaking process. That was all new to me. Working in restaurants through college, I worked full time. I was really familiar with actually Italian wines because of the restaurant I was working in. But the first thing I did when I took the job was really dive into, learning more about wine and really what goes into the Finger Lakes wine region. What really my job started and is management, business, marketing. I do all of that. Um, it's HR. It's always a different hat, but I've never had to actually make wine.
Okay. And no family history in agriculture?
No, no.
Okay. And so what types of grapes are grown here it's an estate winery, correct?
It is. Yep. We grow only vinifera. So that's Riesling, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir. We have Zweigelt, uh, Barbera. We have all kinds of varieties. Mostly Riesling, I would say. We just planted some hybrids, but they're not online yet. So we just did a vineyard expansion and a drainage tile project 2 years ago. So those should be ready in 2 years.
In Barbara, that's very unusual for the Finger Lakes, is it not?
It is, that was something that Dave, when he purchased the property in his first planting, wanted to give something unique and different a try. And it is unique and different. It's been great for us. We have it's very fruitful. It's, a lot of times we have a lot of Barbera. And so it worked out well. It's been interesting for the winemakers to work with. That might be something you want to ask them about. It's a unique grape. It's very acidic. And so they're oftentimes trying to figure out where the balance is there. And since it is so unique, they don't have any experience working with it. But last year we did an iced Barbera. That's been great. We have a traditional method sparkling Barbera that is phenomenal and has gotten great, points in Wine Spectator and Wine Enthusiast. And then we do a couple different. We have a reserve Barbera. We have another Barbera that's non-reserve. It's generally all dry, so it's generally going to be a finished dry, full-bodied red wine.
A robust red from northern Italy, correct?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So what is it like being a woman in the industry?
Well, it is an industry that has a lot of men. It's actually, this is my 15th or 16th year. And I'll say from when I started to now, it's a lot more female, especially in my side of things, where I'm talking to people who are running the business side, doing the financials, HR, all of that stuff. There has been this kind of emergence of females coming up through the industry. So it's been great to see. Primarily it is men that work in the farm. We're unique. We have two women winemakers and a woman vineyard manager. So for me, it's everyday life, it's not, it's normal. But I remember when I first started going to trail meetings and doing things like that, there's oftentimes I was the only woman in the room. Do you know the Stamps over at Lakewood? Liz and her mother are very involved. Ann Martini, she's a OG from the wine industry who's been amazing, a good mentor for women in the wine industry. And you could see that because her daughter is now involved in the winery. So there are Laura Lee from Wagner. So you knew exactly who they were because they were few and far between, I guess. But now you go to those meetings and it's 50-50, if not weighed towards women.
And it's very unusual. Both of your winemakers are women, female.
Yeah.
One graduated from the local program, correct?
FLCC, correct. Paige Vincent, she went to school at FLCC and then left. She has some international training and then ended up in Oregon for a couple seasons training there and landed back here. This is where she's from. She's a phenomenal winemaker, and her counterpart, Kim Marconi, she actually went to school at Hobart and William Smith, then later trained. I think she actually trained, I don't want to mess it up. You'll have to ask her directly. But she trained overseas in winemaking. She did all of her internships and stuff over there.
Okay. So, about how many tons of grapes are you harvesting normally?
Oh, that's so hard to say, because it's so dependent on the weather. And with us, because we've had different crops coming in at different times, and we still have crops that aren't online yet, it's really hard to say. I would say we usually talk about case production. So we are right now producing anywhere between 30 and 35,000 cases of wine annually. And it's grown, 5 to 10% every year. Um,
How many did you produce the first year? Do you remember?
five
5,000.
5,000. Yeah. And we
Which
thought
seems to
that
be
that was so
pretty
many.
standard. Yeah, a lot of people,
Yeah.
that's 5,000, I think, has been mentioned.
Yeah, it's a good place to start. Well, we have 3 wineries and the brewery on the property. When we first started, it was just the 3 wineries, of course, but we needed to have at least, a full tasting flight in each winery. And so for us, 5,000 was probably more than a small starting up winery would start with, but it made sense because of the 3 wineries on the property.
Right. Can you talk about and explain, when I went on your web, the 3 different wine
Sure.
tasting rooms you have? And they're also part of a product level too, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So the idea when we first started up the winery, our founder Dave Mansfield and his wife, he actually came from a background in Major League Sports. Believe it or not, he sold his company that did carts and kiosks for like the Yankee Stadium and the Cowboys and all that, and decided he was going to start a winery here in the Finger Lakes. He has this genius marketing mind. He's really that creative person that his ideas are just endless. His excitement is contagious. He had this idea that he wanted 3 dots on the map here on the northeast end of the lake, because back then, this was before. Now we have Zugabee's down the street. They hadn't opened yet. They were in the process of opening, and Ventosa just opened up. They're the 2 closest wineries to us. So he wanted 3 dots on the map, because if you were coming to the Seneca Lake Wine Trail or the Finger Lakes, you'd see a cluster of dots all towards Watkins Glen in the middle of the lake. And he said, we got to give them a reason to come down here. There has to be more than just us, or they won't come. So that was his initial thought process. And then it came to the marketing part. He had several names, some good, some bad. And he ended with 3 brothers because really he does have 2 other brothers. And the idea when we first opened was that there's a story about Stony Lonesome really is kind of reflection on Dave's personality. He's the more refined brother. And then there was Passion Feet, who was a reflection of the middle brother's personality. He was the flirt in high school. And so it's very female focused. And then there's the winery in the back that is the oldest brother that acts like the youngest brother. And his nickname is Rocker. And so that just made sense. Even though they didn't have ownership in the winery, the story made sense. It's a real story about their personalities. And when we first started, there was going to be it was going to be anonymous who the brothers were. It was supposed to just be kind of something people could get into and believe in and have fun with. And it would be like a competition between brothers on the estate. Over time, people became really invested in who the brothers were. And it became kind of like, what are we doing? We need to tell them what's happening here. We need to tell them our real story, because that's also important, right? And so we ended up, Dave and his wife Luann at that point were the sole owners. We did a little bit of a rebrand and just said, Dave really does have 2 other brothers, but this is really him and his wife, that own the place. And so the idea was really just to have the 3 dots on the map to get people to make the trip down here, or up here, I guess. We're on the northeast end of Seneca Lake. And it worked. And over time, people really loved the different atmosphere. So you could just get out of your car and walk from winery to winery and just feel like you were in a different tasting room. There were totally different wines, totally different brands. There's also, from a branding viewpoint, Stony Lonesome's really our higher end, all vinifera, all the winery itself is very traditional, overlooks the vineyard in Seneca Lake.
And a lot of dry wines, I
Yeah,
noticed,
right. That's
primarily.
really what we submit to awards and magazines for ratings and things like that. Passion Feet is skewed towards semi-sweet, sticking with the idea that it's more of a boutique. We used to have, before COVID, we had a large shopping boutique within the store. That since has gone away because we're seating everyone. But Passion Feet has the Women of Distinction series, which is a really fun series, beautiful artwork. And it's really just a light kind of table wine. Everyone likes it, you know.
And then blended, I noticed some.
Yeah, and then if you get to Bagdare, it's all sweet blended wine. And those wines actually, we do source, obviously we have to source all the grapes from the Finger Lakes, but most of those are not grown around the property because they're all native and hybrid grape varieties.
Okay. Yeah, I was noticing how the wines coincided, the branding of the wines coincided with the various tasting rooms. So
yeah,
that's neat. So I was curious, have you been able to take advantage of any of the New York State incentives?
For COVID?
For growing grapes or... I know the brewery is a separate.
Yeah, so I was going to say we did do a CFA for the brewery for the wastewater treatment program, but for wine we did not. We have not yet.
And so, what are the hours like? I know you're not in the vineyard, but there's still an enormous amount of pressure to.
Yeah. So we're one of the most visited wineries in the Finger Lakes. Pre-COVID, we saw 150,000 people a year. So hours for me, it really is, it's just all the time. The winery is my life. So every day is different, but generally I'm up 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. I start receiving calls and texts from employees. It takes about 150 part-time employees to run the show at the winery over there.
And does that include the brewery as well?
Yeah, and then 40 full-timers. So there's a lot of interaction, communication between them. My day-to-day, is working with the different departments. I work a lot on mentorship, just leading the team, helping where needed, thinking of our marketing and branding initiatives for the year. It depends on the time of year, too. A lot of the financial planning happens in the first quarter. There's never really an off season anymore, which is great. We are busy all the time. And so there's also a lot of projects. We started 15 years ago and we've not had 1 year where we didn't have a building project. So as you saw today, there's a huge landscaping project going on behind, and then we have a 60 by 30 building that's scheduled to go up in June. So that takes a lot of oversight in project planning. I would say hours, because when I get home, since my husband also is a partner at the winery, he does all the production management. So he actually manages the winemaking production, the vineyard, the brewery. Because of that, when we get home, we really catch up what's going on with the winery, wind down around 8 o'clock probably, and start it all over again the next day.
Wow.
Sundays we try to take together off. There are some Sundays that just can't happen because that's really when I have to be at the winery helping on the hospitality side of things. So.
Yeah, one of my questions I always ask is, what is your market? But with these 3 different branded tasting rooms and lines, you've answered that question.
Yeah, we've tried to diversify our portfolio as much as possible.
Yeah.
The reason for that is not just so that we can have something for everyone on the estate, but also we added beer, we have cider, we have craft soda, we have a slushy line that's distributed across the country. Is so that if something does happen, just like this pandemic, we have other pots that we can pull from and sell to. So if we were a winery that was just in distribution and we had a lot of restaurants, we would have been really hurting. But we also had beer, we have cider, we have shipping, we have a whole shipping department. So we try to diversify as a way to protect ourselves from some of the unknowns and to grow the business beyond what just having just a traditional winery could do for us.
And I think you answered that question. How many people do you employ? I think I had read, 40 full-time and then 100 plus seasonal.
Part-time.
So can you describe one of your worst experiences, whether it's weather?
I would say it's hard to top COVID.
Yeah, I didn't want to lead the witness here, but I assume COVID.
COVID. Growing a business and running a business and doing what we do is not easy, and there's always failure is really not an option. So as you grow up and as you grow into yourself within the business, you come up with solutions. You see solutions more than you see problems. Over the years, it's funny, every once in a while, I'll be like, someone will say, do you remember that time this happened? I'm like, oh no, I completely forgot about that. On to the next, But COVID was a challenge like we've never seen before. So I would say that if I had to hopefully say that's the worst time and it's over with and then we're never going back there, it was heartbreaking. It was challenging. It was really scary.
And you couldn't have tastings. Eventually you could, right? Seated only.
Yeah, so it started with, it's one of the worst experiences for me for COVID was laying off all of our hospitality staff. We pride ourselves on being a great place to work. I've had hospitality managers with me for 10, 12, 13 years. Pulling them into my office and saying that they were going to be laid off it was horrible. So that first, and then, there was really no time to really think about that. You had to think, how am I going to survive? So myself, Dave and Luann, Justin, our general manager who we kept on, we leaned into shipping. And we said, if they can't come here, we'll ship it to them. And so that's what we did. We grew our shipping department 1,000% last year. It was all hands on deck.
And I saw you have virtual tastings you were doing.
We did virtual tastings. We actually set up a store in the parking lot that people could drive their car through. We just did everything we could possibly think of. And if we didn't know if it was a good idea or not, we said, well, let's try it. And that's kind of our philosophy in general. This was just magnified. I'm really proud of it too. I'm a different person. Everyone is after this. And we learned a lot, and our business there's a lot of silver linings. Our business has changed quite a bit because of COVID in good ways too. So I think, I'm just happy to be over that. But if I had to say one of the worst times ever was March of 2020.
Right. Some people have said that they had to make changes and they're happy with the changes, and they may continue with the new way versus the former way. Do you feel that way?
A lot of us are doing that, yeah. We do seated table service at this point, and that's really an industry standard. You go to California and you're not necessarily standing at a bar doing your tastings elbow to elbow with people. So we're doing seated tastings for everything in every room. I might change that in the back winery, the winery that's all the sweet wine that is more of supposed to be a rambunctious kind of setting. But for now, that's really worked for us. But before COVID, on a Saturday, we'd see 1,500 in just limos and buses. Wow. Before 1 o'clock. That was our cutoff time. And now we're not taking any limos or buses. So that's great. It's been a nice change for us. Our staff is happier. It's just a more enjoyable time for everyone. We're going to stick with that. So there are definitely changes, and we gained all these new customers. We gained 27 states we can ship to. So we don't want to lose that momentum either. We hired a full-time shipping manager. So there are definitely good things that came from it. I would agree with that.
So aside from COVID, what do you see as the greatest natural threat this year?
Spotted lanternfly is really on everyone's mind. I would say if you're talking about the vineyard, another threat, in the business climate, there's a lot going on. It's just a flurry of new regulations. And so it's a little scary as a business person, you know, when we're talking about increasing, for example, gas price 55 cents a gallon, propane 26%. We're in a rural area and we depend on people to drive to our place
Right.
for tourism. And so that stuff scares me. I think that that isn't a natural threat, but it's a real threat. The weather, I mean, you can't, Mother Nature's unpredictable. It's just part of farming. You know, you can have the tools in place to mitigate as much as possible, but that stuff's not really scary.
Anything else comes to mind? I know we've had a really crazy weather pattern this spring. Did you have early bud break or losses?
We actually didn't get affected by we had bud break and a couple cold nights, but the wind it's windy out. It's windy out here. So
Yeah.
the wind actually was good. We didn't have any issues with it settling. So we have no frost damages.
Oh, that's great.
Where we're at right now. And I think we're out of that. I think we need the wood to knock on, but I think we're in the clear.
And what do you consider your greatest contribution to the industry? You can name more than one if you like.
Yeah. So I've served on the New York Wine Industry Association. It's a volunteer-run organization that represents all New York State wineries. We've had some wins over the years. We've had a few. We advocate for the industry. So legislatively, if there's a bill that comes up that could negatively affect our industry or one that could have positive effect on our industry, we'll either support or oppose a bill. That's kind of, you know, not everyone's thing, but it does make a huge impact on the whole industry and the whole state. So we do lobbying. We do a big event in Albany every year that I put together in the legislative office building. And so that's something that I'm proud to contribute to. I feel like I'm really giving back to the industry. And then over the years, I've done a lot of work with leaders in the industry as they come up. So mentoring people in a way that I wish I had when I was starting so that they can learn from my mistakes instead of making their own. So over the years, I've had a number of people that I've helped either with the start of their business or become, you know, a leader within the industry and for another business. And so I enjoy doing that. And it's something that once they're successful, I feel a sense of pride.
Well, you and your husband are both involved in the winery.
Mm-hmm.
What would you tell anybody interested in a career in the wine industry?
Don't do it. It's a lot of hard work. You know, it's not just a job. It's not, even the managers I can say that work at the winery, there's not a clock in and a clock out. It's constant. And so if you're going to work in the wine industry or own a winery, it's making it part of your lifestyle. So it's making it a place that you want to be at every day and you want people to be happy there, and going into it thinking that it's another job. It's not a 9 to 5. It just can't be.
Or glamorous. That comes up in the past.
That's the other thing too. It is not glamorous. You know, I have people all the time. I'll be there on a Saturday and I'll be walking through the courtyard, picking up garbage or bussing tables, or it's not just drinking wine on the patio. You know, it's never drinking wine on the patio. Honestly, it's doing what needs to be done. I see myself as working for everyone that works for me. So wherever they need help is where you'll find me. I think that people have this fantasy about working or living this kind of life, and it can be great. So it's not that. I enjoy it. But you have to be realistic too. So it's a lot of work, and it's really never, your work is never finished.
And probably stressful with climate unknowns and weather unknowns and market unknowns and COVID unknowns.
If you're the type of person that needs a lot of concrete answers about things, it's probably not for you. There are a lot of unknowns and things change all the time. But that's part of the exciting part too, is you're always challenged. And if you like that, then you'll be fine.
Oh, well, thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to add that we didn't cover?
I don't think so, no. think
All
so.
right. Well, thank you for your time, Erica. I'm at Three Brothers Winery on Seneca Lake, and today is May 13, 2021. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.